Welcome to the Joy of Coding.
Hello, and welcome to episode 351 of The Joy of Coding. My name is Mike Conley. It's so good to have you here. It's the year 2024, first episode of 2024. We're going to be hacking on some Firefox stuff today. Gonna try and start the year kind of easy. Easy does it. It's been a couple of weeks since I've done live hacking, so you may have heard me mention this in times past. Live hacking is a bit of a muscle. I haven't been doing it in a while. That means that my stamina might run out, so we'll see how far I get. We'll see how well we do, but I'm so glad to have you here. If you're watching this live or if you're watching the recording, it's good to have you. Let's start by sharing my screen. I've got some good news to report. Hold on. Here's my screen. Good news. First of all, no plan survives breakfast. I think I know what I'm going to do for the stream. I think I know how things are going to go, but it might go sideways. It might all go, fall apart at the seams. That's quite all right. What you're watching is live hacking with very little preparation in mind. So you're going to be watching me deal with stuff as it happens, as things fall apart, or if we get stuck, sidelined, etc. Like I've said many, many times before, this is software development in the raw. So you're seeing it warts and all. Happy New Year, Smurf D. The second thing I wanted to mention is that, there's an agenda. Check this out. There's an agenda, and you can view this agenda. Depending on where you're watching this, the agenda is going to be in a couple of different places, like the link to it. If you're watching this on Air Mozilla, it's in the details section over there. If you're watching this on YouTube or diode.zone, a link to it is down in the description. And if you're watching this on Twitch, it's down in the channel details. And that should hook you up. And as I update it, you'll see this little spinny spin, and if you reload, the agenda should update. And if you're watching the recording, well, then the agenda should be up to date no matter what. And if people were watching episodes like, I think 350, 349, maybe 348, you will know that I suffered a hard drive failure where I lost all of my agenda syncing stuff. And I have great news, which is that I was able to access the disk on the old machine. I didn't think this was possible. I got in touch with a couple of different data recovery specialists. They were telling me, oh yeah, you got to send this stuff in. I was pretty antsy about that because, the drive contains my some of my keys. And I invalidated. I think I revoked a bunch of those keys. I think I renewed whenever I got this new machine. I renewed the keys, but sometimes you miss stuff, and I would have been a lot more comfortable if I could have done the recovery myself. And it turns out I could. I was able to put my old laptop into the special mode, which allowed me to treat the laptop as basically as an external hard drive. And when I did that, I was able to access the file system, and I was able to retrieve not only all of the agenda stuff that I need to do synchronization, but also all of the sound effects that we had in times past.
That's right!
So we're back at full strength, and I've backed all of this stuff up. I learned my lesson. I've got a much more robust backup system in place, so were my drive to fail again, I could recover with far less heartache, far less stress and sweat. What are we gonna work on today? I talked about Happy New Year and full disk recovery. We're gonna be doing just a little bit of grunt work. So I don't know if some of you might recall from a previous episode, we were starting to do a conversion of some tests from this Mocha Karma Chai thing that the NewTab team had been using historically, which that's great, except that it is very bespoke and doesn't sort of do the same. It doesn't adhere to the same conventions that we use for the rest of the code base. And that's not to say that that's necessarily a bad thing. It just means that there are a number of hurdles and a number of things that they had to reinvent. One of the things they had to reinvent was code coverage. They had to build out their own system for monitoring code coverage. And they also had to invent or bring in a fancy dependency injection system because their tests run inside of the Node environment rather than inside of the Firefox privileged script execution environment, which means that they had to like stub out a bunch of stuff. Long story short, they had to invent a lot of stuff, and that was fine, and that worked for years, except that we're trying to transition a lot of the modules that the across the code base from Mozilla specific JSMs to ECMAScript 6 modules, ESM modules, and the dependency injection system they were using no longer works with ES6 modules. It just doesn't work because of the way that ES6 modules are defined in the language spec. And so the solution to unblock the conversion, because we've converted most of the tree. If you go to Are We ESMified Yet, you can see that we've been doing this conversion to ESM modules for a while now, since last 2022, middle of 2022. I thought we were going to get it done in 2023 because we had this nice line, like a nice trajectory, and then it really flattened out in the middle of 2023, and that's because we hit the majority of the JSMs inside of the new tab code. So if you look to see here in the number of remaining JSM files, there's only 53, but 40 of them we can account to the not all 40, but a significant number of them you can account to the new tab page. Some of them are also in About Welcome. About Welcome used to live inside of new tab, so that mapping has kind of moved out, but the vast majority kind of live within new tab. And so in order to unblock this conversion, we're having to convert these tests to XPC shell tests so that they don't have to do the dependency injection anymore. They don't run in the node execution environment. They run in the XPC shell environment, which means they don't have to mock out or do the dependency injection. And so, that unblocks things. Now, I'm going to forewarn you, this is not going to be fun work. We got a little bit of a flavor of it in a couple of episodes ago where I was working on telemetry feed, and the patch that I ended up writing to convert telemetry feed to an XPC shell test is not a fun one to read or review. I feel bad for my reviewer. This is a big change. Like, it's so big, like the number of changes I made are so big that Fabricator won't even show it by default. You have to sort of expand it here, and it's like all of this was done by hand. And the reason it's done by hand, the reason I didn't like write a script to do it, is because each test kind of needs to be evaluated to figure out whether or not, first of all, it's testing something useful, and whether it can be tested in the XPC shell environment. But then also from case to case, it's going to be different how we want to adapt the test to execute inside of the XPC shell environment. And so that involved like a lot of examination per test. It's fairly drudgerous. It's not fun work, but it's necessary work, and we're going to do that drudgery, some of it today, for another JSM called Highlights Feed, and another test called Highlights Feed Test.js. Now, the good news is that Highlights Feed Test.js is not nearly as long as Telemetry Feed. It's only 822 lines, whereas Telemetry Feed test.js, which is still in the tree because the conversion hasn't landed yet. Telemetry feed is like 2,191 lines. So less than half. Highlights feed is less than half. So I expect this to take less than half the time. And I also expect it to be faster because I've gotten used to the workflow for doing these conversions. I've kind of fallen into a rhythm. So let's get started. Let's figure out how to do this. And the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to start by basing this work on top of the existing patches to convert telemetry feed. That's because I know this stuff is going to land soon-ish, and I don't want to bit rot myself. And the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to move the file. Here, let me pump up the font so you can see what I'm doing. So telemetry feed, or highlights feed, lives under browser components new tab test unit. I believe it's in here. Lib, highlights feed test. There it is. And we're going to move it, not copy it, we're going to move it to browser components, new tab, test XPC shell, and we're going to rename it to test highlights feed .js. That is the convention, the naming convention for XPC shell tests is test underscore. So we're going to do that move. And then we're also going to add under new tab test XPC shell, there's a XPC shell.toml. We have to add highlights feed to the list of of tests. Now, this is unfortunately not in alphabetical order. Oh, it is. AACILMNOPQRS. Okay, good. It is in alphabetical order. So highlights feed will go right here after CFR message provider and before in-flight assets message provider. So we're gonna call. We're gonna say, hey, load test highlights feed. Now, that's not. There's plenty of work left to do. All we've done is set up the infrastructure. This is not a valid XPC shell test. So now we have to start converting this into a valid XPC shell test. And while we're here, we can sort of like clean up some of the code. Like for example, we're gonna put the license header on the top of highlights feed. Now the test itself is not an ESM, so we can't do these kinds of imports. But we can see from like telemetry feed, we use like the sort of the privileged import mechanism to get some of these things. So we're going to need action types, something called dedupe. The global overrider, I don't think we're going to need. We definitely don't want the injector. That's the thing we're trying to get rid of in the first place. And we can get these other two things with normal Chrome utils imports. So let's start by bringing in the right modules. We're going to bring in action types. And we're going to bring in dedupe. Now, dedupe is also an ES module. We can sort of, some of these I can see are ES modules, so we can set up this infrastructure here. Instead of bringing in all of those, we're going to bring in dedupe. And, sorry, what was the, I think it's going to be something like activity stream lib dedupe. I should verify that. I'm going to make this guess that it's dedupe.sys.mjs, but let's make sure dedupe sys.mjs. Activity stream common, so not lib, common. Okay, and we can get rid of this, and we don't want global overrider or injector. We're going to import links cache as well. We're going to skip screenshots for a second because it's actually not an ESM, it's still a JSM, so we have to use a different form for it. Links cache comes from the lib directory, so we can do that. Lib links cache, and yeah, I'm fairly certain links cache. There's no fancy remapping. Yeah, okay. And then screenshots, we have to use the old school way of importing modules, which is like this for old school JSMs. And it will be under the lib directory, screenshots.jsm. So that should take care of our module imports. It looks like it prepares a bunch of fake links and a fake image. And then it does a bunch of stuff that we can't do inside of XPC shell test, which is using like I think this is called like the Mocha framework for describe and before each and whatnot. We don't have this, so none of this is actually relevant or useful. We're not going to use this stuff, all of this infrastructure. Like at the very beginning, it sets up a whole bunch of like mocks and fakery, and we don't need most of that. So we're going to skip most of that, and what we're going to do instead is we are going to start by looking at the actual individual tests. We're going to pull some stuff out. We're going to pull a chunk out. Let's pull. What's a good amount? Wow, that's too many to start. Let's pull these out. Wait, describe in it. 142. Let's find, that's a describe, that's another describe. Let's pull these ones out for now. And we're gonna put those at the top, and we're just gonna start by creating our first test. Function test init. We're going to just test the initialization of this thing, I guess. Should add the sync observer. Should call once initialized on init. Should enable its section. Should fetch highlights on post init. Should hook up the store for the downloads manager. So we might actually be able to do some of the stubbing it looks like all of this just runs on a highlights feed that was just initialized. We might be able to, yeah, new highlights feed. There's like the stubbing out of the store, and links equals fake links. We might actually be able to combine some of these checks. So, for example, oh, and we also want to bring in highlights feed, obviously. So lib highlights feed. We're gonna bring that in, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna say let feed equals new highlights feed, and we should make sure that was able to create a highlights feed, and then fake page thumbs add expiration filter. So what is fake page thumbs? Is this object, and then we so we stub out add expiration filter and remove expiration filter on this thing called page thumbs. And we might be able to do that ourselves if we import the real page thumbs and then stub out those methods. So what we'll do is we'll say let sandbox equals sign-on dot create sandbox. Oh, that means we have to bring in sign-on, so we'll do that. Sign-on is like a stubbing and mocking framework. And then once we've created a sandbox, we have to make sure that we store it at the end of the test. Let's just make sure that this runs. There's a bunch of, this is not doing a whole lot of anything fancy, but let's just build and make sure that the test runs, and then we'll move forward from there. All right, so mock test browser components new tab, test XPC shell test highlights feed. So this should pass. I would expect this to pass. Good, it passed. Okay, and you can tell it passed because that's green and it says pass, and it says okay at the end. All right, so the other thing we want to do is we want to stub out sandbox stub page thumbs dot, what was it, add expiration filter. Add expiration filter. So the way I have to do that is like this. I'm going to create that stub, and we will say assert okay feed dot page thumbs dot add expiration filter called once. Page thumbs add expiration filter was called once, just for the human readability in the log. Let's see what happens if I run that. Good. So that takes care of these two. Now the other thing I like to do is I like to put, it's not telemetry feed, it's highlights feed. Sorry, I've been writing telemetry feed a lot lately, so if I write telemetry feed instead of highlights feed, do shout. Do let me know. Now I actually think there is no init method being called here. So I'm gonna actually rename this test construction highlights feed construction should work and add should work, and then highlights feed construction should add a page thumbs expiration filter, and then there's this on action init. So I'm going to do a completely different task for that. We're going to test this separately. Test init action highlights feed on action init should add a sync observer. So we can do that. We don't have to do that assertion anymore. What we're going to do is we're going to say feed dot on action type init, and let's just see if anything explodes when we do that. Good, nothing. Now it's adding. We know that it's adding an observer, so that's interesting because that means that at the end of a test that calls init, this init, is there an uninit? Yes, there is an uninit. We're gonna want to like remove the observers as well, so we need to remember to uninit. Okay. So feed dot uninit. And the reason I'm not like doing the on action uninit is because we're testing the init action and then I'm cleaning up from that. I believe there's going to be like an uninit test later on. Yeah, they're going to be tests. That seems to be the pattern with these tests. And so I'm just focusing on init. So the thing it wants to test is that like that a sync observer was added. Now the way it was doing this before was it was stubbing out the observer service and, you know, trying to monitor calls for adding observers, and we can't stub out the observer service here. The observer service exists. It's a privileged object that can't be stubbed out. So what we did with telemetry feed instead, enumerate observers. Yeah, I count the observers for a particular topic. And the called with add observer with sync bookmarks, count observers, topic. Okay. So we're going to say this. We're going to say, oh, and we also want these. We want these. What are these? Yeah. We want to import these. Sync bookmarks, finished event. What's the other one? Bookmarks, success event, bookmark restore, fail event. Okay, so we're gonna make sure that let, what's it, synced bookmark const initial synced bookmark obs count equals count observers sync bookmarks finished initial sync bookmarks finished obs count. That's going to be our initial count. We're going to do the same thing with the other two topics. So synced okay. On action init, and then we're going to say assert equal count is this plus 1. And we're going to do the same thing with the other two. So observers were added. It's a little bit like we're just looking at some side effects here, but this is how I'm doing it. might as well test while we have these values. We might as well test that uninit actually removed them. Let's make sure that uninit also removed these observers while we're here. So assert equal okay. So that takes care of this. Should add the sync observer. Yep. Should call section manager once initialized on init. So we can maybe test that as well as this stuff. So we can stub out section manager. What were we doing before? Section manager stub. So it was doing dependency injection. We're gonna just import the real thing. Sections manager. Utils import. Forgot the equal sign. And what we'll do is we're going to stub the once initialized sandbox stub sections manager and once initialized, and then we will assert that after calling on action highlights feed on action init. Actually going to move this down here. Okay. And the way we check that is we're going to say assert called, okay, assert, okay, section manager dot once initialized called once, section manager once initialized was called. Okay, let's see. Does it not know what section manager is? Sections manager. Should be sections manager. Try that again. I added some utility to the agenda. By the way, I saw that you had Smurfd. You might be talking about this, the episode guide. Yes, I suspect that you are talking about this utils agenda. So this is the code that actually does the syncing between my Joplin notebook here, and in particular all of the items that have the exported tag and my website. And it's pretty shaky. Like it's not it's glue and spit. Like this is not fancy stuff. But what I do is I run this like shell command which reads in like my SSH key to like rsync with my it allows me to rsync with my website basically. I use rsync to synchronize with my site. And then I run in a loop this gen and sync command. And what gen and sync does is it watches the folder where these are written to on my disk for changes, and then generates the markdown files, does an rsync, and then exits, and then we like loop. This is the rsync part, and then we loop. So it's like glue and spit. It's not fancy. I wasn't trying to be really super fancy with it, but if you're curious, you can check it out. All of the secrets, my SSH key and stuff, it's all separate. All of my config stuff is separate, but I've got some examples in here so you can see like what I might be using, and whatnot. So that may or may not be of interest to people. You can see my rather antique Shell and Python skills. There you go. And that way, you know, if my drive fails, I can recover fairly easily. Okay, so that passed. That's good. So we can get rid of this. Should enable its section. So enable section. We're gonna also make sure that enable section was stubbed out. Info highlights feed on action init should enable its section. So we're going to assert that enable section was called, and we're going to assert that it was called with section ID. And where does section ID come from? Section ID is brought in from where does it even come from? This is very difficult to understand, this injector stuff. Section ID. Is it something that's in here? Section ID? Yeah, it's exported from highlights feed. Okay. So we're going to import that as well. And let's see if this passes. No, section manager enable section was not called. Now, why not? So that's unexpected. And so what we can do is we can start debugging. So you're going to watch me debug this XPC shell test now. JS debugger port 6080. The way I debug XPC shell tests is I go here, I wait until the debugger or the process launches, I attach to it, I inspect, and I can use the built-in dev tools to inspect. And I'm going to just sort of trace, I'm going to step through calling init. So we do that. We add observers. We call once initialized. And what does that do? Post init. So once initialized is something that we just stubbed out. So I wonder if instead of, like, what was it doing before? The reason now it's obvious. Like, the reason why enable section isn't being called is because once initialized has been stubbed out, meaning its functionality has been replaced with our with our like inert function. So what was? Oh, calls fake. Sign on stub calls fake. Callback callback. All right, if that's what we want to do, we'll do it that way. So stub calls fake. Callback callback. So that should call the callback, which happens to be post init, and that should enable section. It'll also do this stuff, which may or may not be good or bad. We'll see. This might cause some breakage. Whoop, don't want to debug. Let's see. So, cannot get state. The store is undefined. So now we're getting into the real nitty gritty where, like, the store, which is stubbed out normally, in these tests, like originally was stubbed out, now needs to be stubbed out. Feed.stored, we do all of these things. So this we might actually need to copy. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a helper function called function create. I think I did this with test top sites feed. It's like create get top sites feed for test. Yeah, we're going to call get highlights feed for test. And what it'll do is it's going to let feed.store. We're going to do these things. It'll also take a sandbox, because the sandbox.spy. We need to be able to reset this stuff. So sandbox stub return feed. So feed equals sandbox. Let's see what happens now. Okay, we're in good shape. So we ensured that enable section was called. It enabled it section. Should fetch highlights on post init. So that is not technically something that init does. So I'm actually going to put it in a different section. Should hook up the store for the downloads manager. Assert called once feed downloads manager init. That's init. So let's test that as well in this function. Feed download manager init. Now where is download manager defined? Download manager. So it's just this property. We can stub out then. But unfortunately, we create the download manager here on construction, and then the test wants us to say whether or not init is called on the download manager. Okay. Yep, we can do that. Well, I guess if we're doing that, we might as well fetch highlights. Silent spy should fetch highlights. Okay, we can test these two things, I think. Fetch highlights. Sandbox stub feed feed fetch highlights. What's the other one we need to stub out? Downloads manager.init. Okay. And then actually we could say should fetch highlights. The fact that there's like post init stuff, that's a implementation detail, so we won't mention that. Let's space this out a little bit. Fetch highlights. So assert okay feed dot, which is called fetch highlights. Yeah. Called once. Highlights feed dot fetch highlights was called, and what's the other one? Should hook up the store. Should initialize the downloads manager. Assert OK feed.downloads manager.init called once. Highlights feed.downloads manager init was called. Right? Okay. Bad syntax, 144. Right. I was wondering why I wasn't reformatting. Okay. Okay, in good shape. So that's that. That's all of those. We can put those away. Describe observe. Should fetch highlights when we are done async fetch. So when we observe, oh, I see. We're gonna test the observer function. Okay. Insert called with fetch highlights. Okay, that seems like a reasonable thing to test. Add task async function test observe sandbox sign on create sandbox restore. We're gonna create our feed here. Get highlights feed for test, and we're gonna say feed.observe null. What is it? Assert called with broadcast true. Okay, so we're gonna have to set up some stubs here. Sandbox stub feed fetch highlights. Now these each test that we do a fetch highlights on any of these observers. Should not fetch highlights when doing something else. That's not bookmarks. Okay, so we might actually want to do some of this in a loop. Some of this is fairly repetitive. Restore success, restored failed. Observe, this is the topic and this is the data. Let topic data pairs equal sync bookmarks finished event. Actually, we can probably we'll do it like this. Topic sync bookmarks finished event data bookmarks, and another one topic bookmarks restore success event data HTML, and then the last one is topic bookmarks restore failed event, and the data is JSON. For each of these, for let topic data pair of topic data pairs, feed observe topic data pair topic data pair data, and then we will assert that feed.fetch highlights called once, highlights feed fetch highlights was called, and we'll assert that it was called with broadcast passed true. Does that work? If I just pass in this object called with, is it going to just like match on the properties? Let's find out. Yeah, all right. So that's done. That's these three. Topic, description. Should fetch highlights when we are done async for bookmarks. Description. Should fetch highlights after a single successful import. And then should fetch highlights after a failed import. Description. So info, highlights feed, observe, topic data. Okay. That's these three. So far, so good. It should not fetch highlights when we are doing a sync for something that's not bookmarks. Should not fetch highlights for other events. Okay. Test, observe, fetch highlights. And we're going to do a different one. No fetch highlights. Observe. Should not fetch highlights when we are doing a sync for something that is not bookmarks. Finished event, tabs, and some other event. Bookmarks. Highlight, observe, stub, observe. We could probably merge these with the other two, actually, or the other set. Should fetch true. Fetch true. Should fetch false. Actually, I'm going to move that under description. So almost like the definition of the structure should prefix, and then like the actual meat of the structure comes after, which is the topic data. Okay, and then if topic data pair should fetch, else, what? Is something wrong here? Why is this all confused? Okay. Okay, well, assert okay, not feed fetch highlights called once. Highlights feed dot fetch highlights was not called. Actually, I think what we want to do instead of called once is not called. I think that's true. Yeah, okay. So we can then get rid of this. And we are done these. That's observe. Next, filter for thumbnail expiration. And that will take us, I'd say, maybe 1/8 of the way through the test if once we're done this. And so there's still more to go, but we're getting there. Describe filter for thumbnail expiration. Async function test filter for thumbnail expiration should pass rows URL to the callback provided. So you create some rows. You set the sections to be such. You create a stub. You pass that. Oh, I see. You expect the stub to be called by filter. Okay. I don't fully understand. I'm just translating the tests. I'm not too concerned, really, with what's being tested. Beyond making sure that what's being tested should be tested, and this seems okay. Should pass rows URLs to the callback provided. Sounds fine. So let's copy this up here. Now, I don't like to have these be constants because they're not actually, that's not a constant. One thing that I've noticed is that people will often use constant when const is really just saying that the different, like, it gives you a false sense of security whenever it's not a primitive. If you set const to an object, this is just a pro tip. Const obj equals that. It's true that I can't overwrite it because it's a const, but I can modify it. It is not constant. It is mutable. So in order to make sure, like, if this were a primitive, however, like const stir equals my test string, like, obviously I can't say, like, stir equals stir plus more. I can't modify that string. It's read only. But you know, so if this was a primitive, I'd be okay with const. But because this is actually writable, you could add more rows even though it's a const. I don't like to call things like this consts because it gives a false sense of what, like, characteristics it has. Like, const just means I can't overwrite what this points to, but I can modify it, what it points to. It's not locked. So what we're going to do is we're going to say let sandbox equals sign on create sandbox, let feed equals create get highlights feed for tests. Create that. We'll do all that. We're going to create a stub, and then I think we can just do assert okay stub dot called once. Filter was called, and then assert okay stub dot called with exactly, and then I guess this. Let's see if that passes. So that's done. Should include a preview image URL in the callback results. So these are different enough that I might want to. I'm just gonna create a new one. Test filter expiration, filter for thumbnail expiration calls, and then this one. I'm gonna say this one include preview image URL, and we'll just go ahead and update the description. Const rows, so I'm gonna do that. rows equal that stuff. Highlights, row initialize. Yeah, looks good. Called once, and then called with exactly. Can't access lexical declaration of row. Oh, whoops. Whoopsie daisy. Good. Okay, so that one's done. Should pass an empty array if non-initialized. Okay. So we're going to copy that, and we're going to say test for not initialized. We'll update the description. So rows, initialized, we're going to say, all right, here we're going to do this. And then stub called with filter was called with exactly the empty array. An empty array, not the empty array. All right, and that's that. Let's commit what we've got so far. Bug such and such convert highlights feed.test.js to an XPC shell test. The next thing we're going to convert are fetch highlights. We're gonna, how much of this is described? I think this is a pretty important one because it's a highlights feed. We might have to break this up a little bit. Wait a second. Yeah, does this just go on forever? Oh, it ends there. All right, fair enough. Let's take this. This is what we'll convert next. And what's left after that? Fetch image, uninit, on action, and that's it. I don't think we're gonna get all of this done, but we're gonna get fairly close. I think we might get halfway done. Let's see. Add task, async function, test. Fetch highlights was the first thing we test. Should return early if top site's not initialized. Top site's not initialized. Okay, so info, telemetry feed, or highlights feed, fetch highlights, should return early. Okay, sandbox. We're gonna sandbox restore down here. We need to create a feed. Get highlights feed for test. We spy on the links cache request method. We set some stuff. State, we call fetch highlights. Okay, so we're going to say assert okay. Oh, okay, so the first one we're gonna have to do this one in a second, but we'll do the simple one first. Assert not called. Highlights feed links cache request was not called. Let's make sure that that passes. Whoa, no. Oh no. Did I accidentally commit that? I don't think I did. Okay. That's fine. Okay, that passes. And so this this first assertion, assert not called fake new tab utils. So new tab utils, I don't know if we actually import those. They were stubbed out before. We're going to need them now. New tab utils. Yeah, we need to bring those in. New tab utils, and we're going to stub out, what's the name of the thing? Activity stream links get highlights. Sandbox stub new tab utils activity stream links get highlights. We'll say assert okay. New tab utils not called. New tab utils activity stream links to get highlights was not called. Okay. Good. Next. And that's this one. We just did that. Should return early if sections are not initialized. Okay. So similar. Sections not initialized. So we're gonna just replace some of these. Initially, okay. Otherwise the same, right? Now, are these all going to be the same? Should fetch highlights. No, this next one will be different. Okay. Should fetch highlights if sections are initialized. Should fetch highlights if top sites are initialized. Okay. Fetch highlights top sites initialized. What uses this helper? It's not clear. This. So we say we spy on links cache requests. We're gonna call a stub get highlights. Okay, so we're gonna do this basically. We're gonna say called once was called and request was called. Can't access property. Map of undefined. Links cache. Request 96. Maybe we should stub this then, instead of spying on it, so it doesn't actually go through. Pages is undefined. Highlights feed 140. Order highlights for order highlights, and that comes from fetch highlights 208. Many pages. Where does many pages come from? Many pages, we go and we request from the links cache. I see. We request from the links cache. What did we used to do? Globals set a links cache. I have a feeling there's some trickery going on here. Links cache. We set globals. And then down here, links equals fake links. And where's links? Where's links used? Get highlights, links, that's what it is. So we have to stub out these things. I think that's fine. I think that's also something we should probably do right from the get-go, and maybe during setup. Add setup async function setup, sandbox equals sign on create sandbox. Register cleanup function, sandbox.restore, and then we're going to say new sandbox stub new tab utils activity stream links. Actually, it's this. Get highlights. And we're going to have it resolves with fake links. And then delete pocket entry. Resolves with the empty object. And archive pocket entry resolves with the empty object. An empty object. Process highlights. Stream provider process highlights. Calls fake. Okay, let's see what happens if I do that. Attempt to wrap get highlights, which is already wrapped. Oh no. And that happens. Line 73. Line 322. Can't do it again. Well, I guess we can always... Oh. We have to reset it each time? See, that's no good. It's no good. Was it again? It's line 322 that wants to stub out activity stream links. Get highlights. You know what we can do maybe? See, what I'm worried about is doing this inside of add setup. We'll do it once for the entire file, which makes it really a pain in the butt if you're going to be like wanting to check the call count or change the return value on some of these things, because you're going to need to reset the state in between. So instead of doing this here, I've got a different idea, which is to do it here. And then each time the sandbox is restored, these get reset. And then line 322, instead of, like, we can just not do that here or here or here. Let's see what that's like. Already trying to wrap it again. Did I forget to restore? It was wrapped on line 68. Test, observe, fetch highlights. Oh yeah, I need to reset the sandbox each time here. Sandbox restore. I think we should probably move that sandbox into here. And then again on line 253. Was already 272. It's complaining that on line 272. Oh yeah, I need to restore here as well. Sandbox.restore. And here. Sandbox.restore. And here. Sandbox.restore. How about now? Still back to the original problem. which is that pages is undefined on highlights feed 140. I'm still happy with what we did to stub out things like that. Page of pages. So order highlights isn't being passed with anything. Past anything. Many pages. Where's many pages come from? We get it from links cache request. And right, we chose to stub instead of spy. And maybe we need to go back to spying now that we've stubbed out that other stuff. There we go. That's what I needed. Okay. Get rid of those. All right, that was exciting. So we can get rid of that. Should chronologically order highlight data types. That's interesting. Fetch highlights. Chronological order. Should chronologically order highlight data types. This is very interesting. Links equals these things. So we can create this construction. Expected chronological, expected history, highlights equal, and then it's this thing, feed, fetch highlights options, no options, and then to get the rows from the I see. So it's used a couple of different places. So we might want to actually extract this out into a helper function. I mean, it's not that get highlights row. Function. Async. We're going to call it feed options. And then sections manager stub. Section. Sections manager stub. I see. I'm stubbing out the entire sections manager. Oh, what a pain. Sandbox stub, sections manager, update section, fetch highlights, return. Sections manager, let rows equals that. Or maybe we just return. No, can't. Gotta do sandbox restore, return rows. Function object destructuring. Let rows. Okay, does that make you happy? Use array destructuring. Ugh. What a pain in the butt. All right. For the linting rules. Okay, so we do all of these things. And then we say await, fetch highlights rows. And sorry, what is the definition? Is feed and then the options. Okay, feed. And how does this stuff get? Oh no. This is in the original test. Right. It's a global and links and fake links. Fake links equals an array. Resolves to the fake links. I think what we're going to do is we're going to do this. New tab utils activity stream links get highlights dot resolves links, because we know that there's already a stub on it. We're just going to override it. Expected for each assert equal URL. Is that it? I'm gonna put this away. I will be very surprised if this passes. Let's find out. Yeah, can't access property arg, section manager, first call, update section first call is undefined. That's line in our utility. Sections manager, update. Oh, right. Sorry. Need to do that. Hey, it actually did work. Hi, Chromazon. What are you working on for Mozilla? Right now I'm doing a little bit of maintenance. I'm converting a test from one form to another to make it easier to do some re-architecture, and converting from an old module format to a new module format. So it's not a very exciting, like, flashy piece of work, but it's necessary for cleanliness of the code base, and it's a bit of a slog. But we're getting there. So that one's done. I'm actually surprised that that passed. That's wonderful. Okay, so we can call that one converted. I'm going to do one more on the stream, and then I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it there. So, should fetch highlights if top sites are not enabled. Okay, so I'm going to copy a smaller version of this. Should fetch highlights if top sites are not enabled. So what this does, it spies on links cache. That's right. It sets this pref. And I'm going to copy the description. Top sites not enabled. Request top sites enabled is false. Feed fetch highlights called once. It should work. All right, let's see. How often do I stream? Great question. I stream every week, mostly. Like, I took a break during the winter holiday. This is my first episode back for 2024. I took something like 2 or 3 weeks off. When was my previous episode? It was on December 13th, so almost a month off. But I'm pretty regular. I stream about once a week on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you want to follow along, you can. If you follow me, I don't know if you are on the Fediverse or something, but if you follow me at, I'm no longer. Oh, geez, this is needs to be updated. I'm at Mozilla.social on Mastodon. Mozilla.social. I'm M Conley, and chat with me on Matrix. Yeah, I stream on most Wednesdays. I need to update the template here to be Mozilla.social. Mozilla.social. M Conley. There we go. And yeah, you can watch me on Wednesdays. Hey, thanks for checking out the stream, Chromazon. Yeah, sometimes I do more exciting things than this, but sometimes it's like a slog. You kind of have to do what you got to do. All right. Well, with that, I think I'm going to end the stream there. I think we got, I'd say about half of the file converted. I'll probably do the rest of it today off stream. We can get this up for review, and that'll be good for moving us towards a world where we no longer have our custom JavaScript module loader, and we can just use ECMAScript 6 modules like the cool kids. Hey, thanks for watching episode 351 of The Joy of Coding. Let me know what you thought. I'm going to put a link to this bug, actually. Copy summary. We're going to put it there. I can actually copy as Markdown. You can put it there. You can follow along if you want. You can track my progress through it. Let me know what you thought of this episode. There's a rate this episode link here in the agenda. I'm actually going to drop it into the chat. Rate this episode link. It's a form you can fill out to let me know what you thought. And I read everything that comes in. You can also use it to ask questions. I can try and answer questions on the stream. We'll do like a letter reading if you want. So go ahead and send your stuff in. And with that, Happy New Year, a belated Happy New Year. Let's make it a solid 2024. Maybe we'll get to episode 400 in 2024. That'll be exciting. I think that I'd have to stream. I'd basically not be able to take many breaks. We'll see. I suspect that we will not get to 400 within 2024, but we might get pretty close. And then that'll be very exciting. Episode 400. We just did 350. 400's the next milestone. Nice round number. I don't know what we'll do. Maybe I'll wear a funny hat. We'll see. All right. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. Have yourselves a great week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
The joy of coding.
See ya.